Yesterday, when we left the Israelites, Pharaoh had just let them go from Egypt, and no longer did they have to be slaves for the Egyptians. And Moses was leading them out into the desert. So we're going to pick up our lesson today. It's called, it's all about the parting of the Red Sea, and it's from Exodus chapter 14. The Lord had sent plagues throughout the land of Egypt to soften the heart of Pharaoh, so that he would let the Hebrews go to the desert to worship God. Pharaoh had always said no until the night of the last plague, and that's the one we talked about yesterday. The Hebrews, or the Israelites, had been instructed to prepare a lamb to eat and unleavened bread on the eve of their last day in Egypt. God was going to send the final plague, which was to take the life of the firstborn of all the houses of Egypt, including their livestock. God only spared those who had listened to him and prepared the lamb and placed blood on the frames of their doors. After the Lord took the life of Pharaoh's firstborn, his heart was softened. He called for Moses and Aaron in the middle of the night, and he said, "Go, take the people and worship your God in the desert." The people left at night, because remember, God had told them to be prepared, to have everything ready, have their shoes on, and be ready to go when he said it was time. The Egyptians gave them gold and silver and clothing. The people of Israel began their journey into the wilderness and back toward their promised land, the land that the Lord had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The angel of the Lord led the people by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire at night. The Lord led them away from their enemies and into the wilderness until they came to the banks of the Red Sea. Pharaoh's heart became hardened again. He wanted the Hebrews to return to Egypt and still be his slaves. He gathered up all his chariots and his horses and his army to go after the Israelites. So the Israelites are walking through the desert. Remember, there was a whole bunch of them, lots of people, and they're all walking, and they come up to this ocean, the sea. Have you ever been to the ocean and how much water there is? And there's no way around. And they're thinking, what are we going to do now? And at the same time, Pharaoh was thinking, nope, I want the Israelites to come back. I want them to come back and be my slaves. And so now he had all his chariots and horses. Chariots are like carriages or buggies. The horses were attached to them. So they're all together. They're all getting ready to go out to get the Israelites and bring them back. When the armies of Pharaoh were some distance away, the Hebrews saw them and they were afraid. So they're standing there at the sea, at the big, vast amount of water, the big ocean, the big spread of water, wondering what they're going to do, because they can tell that the Egyptians are coming their way, and they don't know how they're going to get past the ocean, past the water, past the sea. They asked Moses why they had been brought to the desert to die. Moses told them to not be afraid, but that the Lord would rescue them from Pharaoh. So the people were starting to get scared, and they forgot that they were supposed to be trusting God and knowing that he would take care of them. And Moses told them to not be afraid. Then the angel of the Lord that was leading the people placed the cloud between the Hebrews and the Egyptians. It was a fire for the Hebrews so that they can see, but darkness to the Egyptians. The Egyptians were unable to find them. Moses stretched out his rod over the sea, and the Lord opened up a path in the sea. The walls of water were on both sides, and the Lord sent a wind to blow all through the night to give the Hebrews a dry path through the sea. So he opened it up. It was like having a path, a walkway through the water, and the land was dry. It wasn't even muddy. It was perfectly dry. And they're walking, and the sides beside them are all water, and all they can see is the water as they pass through it. And the Egyptians, it was like it was completely dark for them. They could not see where the Israelites were. And remember, there was a lot of people, so it took a lot of time to get all of them down the path and through the water onto the other side. The armies of Pharaoh followed the Hebrews through the path in the sea with the walls of water on both sides. The angel of the Lord began to fight for the Hebrews. The wheels of the chariots began to fall off. The Egyptians knew that the Lord was fighting for the Hebrews, but it was too late. Once the last Hebrew was on the shore, Moses stretched out his rod over the sea, and the walls of the water collapsed, and all the Egyptians were lost in the sea. The Lord saved the Israelites that day from the hand of Pharaoh and the Egyptians. So all of the Egyptians were riding onto the path into the sea to go get the Israelites. And as soon as the very last Israelite had walked and stepped onto the dry land on the other side, the water came back down and the Egyptians were buried in the sea. Now, the Egyptians knew that they were in trouble. They knew that God was on the Israelite side. But they were still had hard hearts, and they kept going after them, and they wanted to try to get them back. But God, like he had promised, Okay, so now we have all the Israelites on the other side, and the Egyptians have been swallowed up by the sea. So when the Israelites saw this miracle, they had a deep respect and awe for the Lord. They believed the Lord and his servant Moses. This is the same amazing God that we serve today. He will save his people from the problems that we face. He loves us and cares for us. So even though the Israelites had a moment where they started to be scared and wonder, is this going to really work out? God still took care of them. And that's what we need to remember, that sometimes things are a little scary or not what we're expecting, or things that make us sad or nervous, but God is on our side and he loves us and he'll take care of us. And yesterday we talked about praying and how important it is to pray when things are on your heart that you need to share with God. So the Israelites realized how important it was in this moment that they trusted God and they trusted that he would take them to the other side of the sea. In your packet today is a coloring sheet to show the people going through that path onto the other side and getting away from the Egyptians. Tomorrow we'll have another lesson about Moses and continue to see what's happening with Moses and the Israelites as they're in the desert and they're learning to trust God more and more. Have a good day.